When it comes to premature ejaculation, the main cause is actually how your nervous system responds in a sexual situation. And when you understand this, you can see that it's possible to actually completely transform how you respond on a subconscious level to sexual stimulation. And this is how any man can go from experiencing premature ejaculation to lasting as long as they want in bed. I'm going to break this down, what exactly this means and how you can change this response in this video. I'm Jonathan White. I'm here to help you master your sexual energy so you can manifest your ideal life. If you're enjoying the content, make sure you hit subscribe to support the channel and get your free ejaculation control course through the link in the video description below. So to really simplify things, first of all, understand that there's two basic responses that you can have to sexual stimulation. One is a tension response and the other is a relaxation response. And these correspond to specific functions of your nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. So the tension response is linked to your sympathetic nervous system. This is the fight or flight response. The ejaculation function itself is a function of your sympathetic nervous system. It's essentially a tension response. And then there's the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest. This is when you feel calm, you feel grounded, your parasympathetic nervous system is active. And the parasympathetic nervous system is also the pathway that promotes solid erections and sexual pleasure. So essentially, your sexual experience is going to be dominated by one pathway of the nervous system. And this is a bit of an oversimplification because both are often active at the same time, but there still is a dominance of one pathway versus the other. So here's the thing, whatever dynamic you have to sex right now, it's the product of years and years of doing things in a certain way over and over. And if you ejaculate quicker than you would like, well, then it's very likely that you've ingrained in a tension response to sex and sexual stimulation. And there's a lot of different dynamics to this, but I think to really simplify things, there's two main ones that men have as far as their response to sexual stimulation. There's a dynamic of nervousness where they shut down and the sympathetic nervous system kicks on. They essentially go into survival mode, which means that ejaculation happens with, just the slightest touch. Then there's the dynamic of overexcitement, meaning that they're maybe a little bit too eager for what's happening during sex. They're too eager to dive in towards that ejaculation. And this overexcitement also pulls you into that sympathetic nervous system pathway. So I'm going to go a bit deeper into these dynamics. So the pattern of nervousness, we could call this performance anxiety, is essentially one full of self-doubt, one full of self-judgment. There's a feeling that there's something at stake. Like, uh-oh, if I don't perform in a certain way, my partner's going to be unhappy with me, they may leave me, whatever it is. And this is often ingrained in a few different things. Number one is a feeling of shame around the body, a feeling of unworthiness about ourselves. For whatever reason, we get programmed into this. And I think sex is a place where this really comes out. And so what this often looks like is you go into intimacy with, maybe there's an eagerness to have sex, there's a desire, there's an attraction with your partner, there's arousal. But then once things start to progress, the mind starts to run. Starts to go into negative scenarios. It starts to create negative self-talk. And by the time you start having sex, you're in maximum fight or flight mode. Your sympathetic nervous system is fully online. Cortisol is pumping through your system. You're basically really stressed out. And tension also is creeping into your body. Very likely your breath is getting very shallow. Your pelvic floor is tensing up. And essentially you're now a loaded gun so that as soon as your penis is being stimulated, you ejaculate immediately, or at least very quickly. And there's often a few different root causes for this. It's often due to a past sexual experience that was embarrassing and really held a strong charge in your mind. And so that every sexual situation, you're reliving that experience and expecting that experience again. You have a strong bond to it. And this dynamic can also simply be caused by the inherent shame that we're programmed around our bodies and around sexuality. It's like we grow up learning about sex and seeing it on TV and things like that, but we're often conditioned to feel shamefully about our bodies, often feel very secretive and guilty about our sexual desires. And the actual act of sex itself, it brings out this shame, it brings out this vulnerability. And it can actually put you into a state of nervousness, of anxiety, and discomfort. And subconsciously, you may want to get that experience over with as quickly as possible. And that shows up as ejaculating too quickly. And I'm going to talk about some very simple things you can implement to completely rewire this pattern in your mind and body. But the other dynamic I want to talk about is that one of overexcitation. Again, like any sexual dynamic, it's something that became ingrained into your mind and body through repetition over and over again. This pattern of overexcitation usually comes from being someone who watches porn, someone who's spent a lot of time jerking off to porn. And not saying there's anything morally wrong with this, but as I've talked about in other videos, porn has a lot of destructive effects on our brain chemistry and on our arousal response. And what it often does is it hijacks your arousal response, gives you very sharp hits of dopamine and spikes your arousal level very, very quickly because you're seeing all these, very stimulating images on a screen. It creates maximum arousal in a very short period. And usually when you're jerking off, you're like edging or ejaculating very quickly. Maybe in your teenage years, you were getting it done with as quickly as possible so that mom wouldn't walk in on you. And essentially what happens here is the body often starts to associate sexual arousal, that input, as being a stimulus, and how your body starts to respond is, okay, we need to go to the highest level of arousal possible, the highest level of tension. And so this creates this pattern to where sexual stimulation, it just over arouses you. It very quickly pushes you into this point of over excitation. Another dynamic here that men go in line with this over excitation is they often squeeze their pelvic floor muscles to sort of squeeze more pleasure out of the penis, because when you squeeze your pelvic floor muscles, it engages a certain sympathetic pathway in your nervous system circuit. So the pleasure feels sharper and it brings you closer to that point of ejaculation more quickly. But the detriment of this is when you do this over and over again, this becomes your body's habitual response to sexual stimulation. So the penis is being stimulated equals squeeze the pelvic floor muscles. And that tension in the pelvic floor activates the sympathetic nervous system and further increases the buildup towards ejaculation. So I know I just dropped a lot of information, but let's get to the most important part, which is how do we overcome this situation? How do you rewire this pattern in your nervous system and your mind and body? So as with any really ingrained subconscious pattern, you need something that you can use in the moment to shift that pattern. And there's two very, very simple things that you can use to completely shift your state very quickly. First thing is your breath. And if you've been following me for a while, you may have heard this many times, but it is so important, and it's something you'll probably consistently forget about, because your breathing pattern is always a readout. It's creating a communication of what's happening within your mind and your nervous system. And when you're going into the stressed out, nervous, sympathetic response, or the overexcited response, your breathing becomes very shallow and it often becomes up in the chest. And so deep, smooth belly breathing, breathing from your diaphragm. And think of breathing into your pelvic floor, like inflating your pelvic floor muscles, as though you're breathing into your genitals as you inhale. Exhale fully. So getting that deep breathing going will help keep you in the parasympathetic state. And it also gives your mind something to do, because this is the biggest challenge for a lot of men, is in the performance anxiety, the monkey mind kicks in. It's going, oh, what are they thinking? What am I doing? I'm going to ejaculate too quickly. Uh-oh. The mind's just going, and it's disconnected from the body. So focusing on something like the breathing brings you back into the present moment. And instead of that fast moving monkey mind, which links to like beta waves of brain consciousness and just an overexcited, overstimulated state, the monkey mind pulls you more into sympathetic nervous system. So when you can give the mind something to do instead of thinking and worrying, the breathing is a very simple tool for that. The other very simple thing is to notice where you're tensing up in your body. Notice the areas where you're starting to constrict. And some very common areas that will tense up, which I want you to look at, are your face, especially around the eyes, the muscles of your face, your diaphragm, just at the base of the ribs here, that often tightens up when you're nervous, and your pelvic floor. And this goes against the advice that a lot of people have, which is do Kegel exercises to strengthen your pelvic floor muscles to try to control ejaculation. And that is terrible advice in my opinion. It usually just further lodges in these tension patterns. So notice the face, the diaphragm, the pelvic floor, actually anywhere in your body that you feel tension, but these are some very common areas that you will tense up, because any tension, any muscular tension creates a constriction of your nervous system energy and the life force within your body, and it's going to further put you into a stressful state. So the easiest way to shift out of a stress-based response and to shift into parasympathetic is to deeply release any tension. And now you can use the two things I told you about, the breath and the levels of tension in the body. You can take it anywhere you feel tense. So if you're going into sex, if you're going into intimacy with a partner, you feel yourself in that nervous state, just feel, where do I feel the tension in my body? Oh, I feel it in my diaphragm, for example. You take a deep breath into it. Use the exhale to release the tension. I just do that consistently. Where do I feel tension? I breathe into it. I release. And you can actually use that all the way into sex, even as you're moving, as you're lovemaking. Where do I feel tension? I breathe. I exhale and release. And the thing is that when you're fully in a state of physical relaxation, you cannot be in a sympathetic dominant state. It's impossible. But the levels of tension are often very subtle. So this gives you something to do. And it's going to feel a little awkward in the beginning because you're used to just like going with the flow and going into these subconscious patterns you have, which are often making the issue worse. So this gives you something brand new to do, and it will be a practice. You may want to spend some time every day doing this routine, just like laying on the ground or something, just releasing tension, breathing. And notice how it stops the monkey mind and gets you deeper into your body. And when you get familiar with doing this over and over in a sexual situation, you're going to get a lot better at it. And it's actually going to become your habitual response. You start to notice, oh, I'm tightening up, I'm tensing up, I'm pulling away. And that is your cue to breathe and release. That will become a habit instead of tensing up and making the issue worse. So again, the remedy to premature ejaculation is to stay parasympathetically dominant. And the easy way to do that is to make sure you're breathing consistently, smoothly, fully from the belly, and releasing any patterns of tension that start to arise in your body. So to wrap things up, overcoming premature ejaculation really requires overcoming your nervous system response that you have to sexuality. And this isn't something that happens overnight. It's going to take some time, but with consistency, with practice, any man can do this. And I have to say that there's a lot of techniques, there's a lot of tips and tools people share, and some are simply band-aids that won't really get you there. So once again, the most efficient thing you can do is rewire your mind and body to hold more relaxation, to release and let go as a response instead of to tense up and tighten up. And if you're interested in going much deeper into this training, you'll probably be interested in my Multi-Orgasmic Man 3.0 course. This is a complete training system, athletic level training system with guided routines every single day to help you over time shift out of a sympathetic based sexual response into a parasympathetic relaxation based sexual response so that you can develop complete ejaculation control, so that you can actually experience non-ejaculatory orgasms and experience much more pleasure and confidence, not just in sex, but in your daily life. You can find more information about that course. I'll put a link to that in the description of this video. It will be opening for registration soon. And if there's any other aspects of ejaculation control or overcoming premature ejaculation you'd like me to discuss in future videos, let me know in the comments. Give this video a like to support the channel, and have a great day, my friend.